The Legend of Legacy HD Remastered is a really interesting game to have played. Not just because it's a remaster of a 3DS game that I've never played before, but also because it does a lot of things differently from the types of RPGs that I usually play. Games like Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, the entire Dragon Quest series, Paper Mario series, Octopath Traveler series, and the older Final Fantasy titles are of the style that I most enjoy. And while a similar turn-based combat system is here, there's a heavy emphasis placed on exploring and the way you improve your characters. And for my tastes, is not nearly as enjoyable or rewarding as gaining XP and levels. I want to do something a bit different for this review, since there's already plenty of information out there about the game since it's a remaster, and the original release came out in 2015. I want to cover all the key components of the game and go over the good and the bad of them. But first, let me give you the basic structure of the game in case you are unfamiliar. The two pillars of the game are exploration and turn-based combat. You'll acquire maps to areas which you'll seek to fully explore and fill out to reap the most rewards. And while engaging in turn-based combat to improve your skills, not level up as there's no XP system here. You'll return to town to use the inn and shop, rinse, and repeat. There's very little story guidance here, so it'll be almost entirely up to you to figure out your way forward. Now with that said, let's get to it. The first thing that I immediately noticed, and I'm sure you did too, is the art style. This style was really common during the 3DS era for RPGs, and with this HD remaster, it looks better than ever. The entire game looked really sharp and crisp, with the lone exception being the main town you'll revisit often. The buildings just look low resolution compared to everything else. It's like they didn't bother to improve them or redraw them completely, which they probably should have. I played through the Nintendo Switch version of the game, and none of the upgrades in the remaster came at a cost to performance. It ran butter smooth the entire time, and the load times are almost non-existent. It's super fast. The music throughout is pretty good. It wasn't anything I'd listened to outside of the game, but it all felt appropriate and matched the tone of what was happening on screen. I really enjoyed the fact that when you start the game, you can choose your starting character, and this even goes further as there are different endings depending on who you chose to start with. Your party always consists of 3 characters, with more to recruit as you play, which you can swap in and out at the local inn. And while this variety of characters is really nice, I never felt compelled to switch my party. That's mainly because the game already felt a bit grindy, with me needing to try and improve my members' skills in order to overcome a sudden difficulty spike, but also because swapping a character feels like a reset essentially. Characters not being used gain nothing from sitting in reserve, and since every character can use any piece of equipment, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by switching, especially the further you get into it. So now, that leads me to one of my biggest complaints with the game, and that's the way you improve and learn new skills. Each character improves by using a certain weapon type or action. So if you use mainly spears with a character and no other weapon, after 5 or 6 hours into the game, it'll make no sense to use anything else since it'll be far underpowered in comparison. I know there's other games in this style, but for me personally, I didn't like it at all. On top of that, the game really does an incredibly poor job with its first-time user experience. You are mostly left on your own to figure things out, and I'll admit, the way the shards and elements work eluded me for far longer than it should have. There is an in-game guide, which I highly recommend reading if you play this, but even that doesn't quite give you all the information that it should. There's way better information out there that explains the elemental system and how it works, so give it a look if you are a first-time player looking to play this. I don't think I'd be able to explain it in a way that didn't just confuse you further, if I'm being honest. In the town, you can speak with the king, who will give you tidbits of information to help you proceed, but if you are the type that likes to have a clear path forward, then this game will turn you off pretty quickly. It's up to you to explore its many locations, reap its rewards, and figure out where to go next. You'll often enter an area where you aren't supposed to be yet, but don't know that till its enemies or an area boss just decimates you in battle. I can't think of an RPG that I died in more than this one. Even killing super bosses in games like the Octopath Traveler series and Super Mario RPG didn't get me killed as much as this. It was frustrating quite a few times where I turned the game off and took a break. Attempting to simply run from a battle will send you back to the start of that area completely. So make sure to quick save often to avoid the annoyance and lost progress. One caveat of this though is that I used it to my advantage to fast travel to the start if I was done in an area and wanted to leave quickly. I often found exploring the different locations to be a bit annoying since the pop-up style of the art tends to pop up way too close to the player. So unless you move slowly, you'll often have an enemy appear right on you. Get hit by traps that decrease your max health till you use the inn, or just have your view angle obscured by the world. The pop-up style made sense on the 3DS, and I'm sure it looked nice with the 3D, but here, it was a tad bit annoying, and some transparency should have been added or an outline to the player's model so you can see where you are when obscured by objects that are blocking the camera's view. Legend of Legacy HD Remastered does get an A+ for variety though, as there are so many different environments to explore throughout. Forests, caves, deserts, swamps, just to name a few. It's a lot of fun to see where you'll go next. If you enjoy just exploring and don't care much about story focus, you'll find a lot of fun in that aspect of the game. So we've covered pretty much everything at this point, I think, except the story, and the reason for that is because I don't have much to say. I enjoyed what was presented here. It's told to you mostly in bits and pieces, but I found the narrated segments when entering a new area to be really well done and the best part of the story's presentation.
To survive in such a place, the rabbit must become the boar. For only the strongest would survive here. Such was the law obeyed by all who called this land home.
If you like grand and elaborate stories, you'll be disappointed here, but for me personally, it did enough to keep my interest. Lastly, a few other things I found to be a bit baffling with how they work were the way the store works in the town and the amount of currency you accrue from winning battles. You earn very little money for battles, so the best way to earn it to buy new maps and upgrade your gear is by getting 100% on maps that you already acquired to sell to the vendor and by finding treasures during that hunt. It felt a bit too slow, and while we're talking about the shop, it carries a random selection of items when you visit. This makes it a bit too RNG to acquire upgrades. It would have been better if more unlocked for purchase as you progressed, but that's just my 2 cents. The Legend of Legacy HD Remastered is a game that does not hold your hand. I think its target audience is those that like to explore and don't mind a bit of a grind. Not grind in the traditional sense of, oh, I need to be level 20 here because that's what the enemies are, but grind in order to improve your abilities so you can finish off the enemy before they finish you off. And that aspect of it was my least favorite part. Even if you don't want to grind, you basically have to. A lot of the pathways are really narrow, making enemy encounters unavoidable, and you can't run away either since that'll return you to the start of the area you're in. it really is a double negative. It's a really hard game to recommend or not recommend because it depends entirely on player taste. For those that like a traditional leveling system and a story-heavy focus, this is not a game for you. For players seeking a more difficult experience that leaves almost everything up to you to figure out, how to proceed forward, which abilities to improve, what's the best party layout, what formations during battle should I use, what do the symbols mean on the inventory screen, is this armor better or worse because there's no compare option, etc., etc. There are so many things, both big and small, you will need to figure out that should have been made much more clear or streamlined. But if this stuff doesn't bother you, then this game will be right up your alley. For as much as I found myself annoyed and frustrated by some of its mechanics, I also found myself coming back for more, eager to explore that next large area to see what I'll find. There's a fun game here, even in spite of its flaws, but please be aware of those, as you'll either be hooked for the duration or feel done with it after 30 minutes. If you're willing to suffer through it a bit and figure it out, I think you'll find a rewarding and enjoyable RPG experience. And with several different playable characters, multiple endings, and a new game plus option, there's plenty of content to keep you busy for many hours. But if you want a more clear path where you never feel lost, frustrated, or confused, well, then I'd say look elsewhere. I appreciate you watching this review, and I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, comment below if you have any questions, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And until next time, have a good one.